Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. This show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we will give you the real deal, not the bias or spin the major media, politically correct opinions masquerading as facts give you. When we provide you opinions, you will know it. This show rejects doctrinal uniformity. This political disease is a terminal threat for our democracy. The anti-American mobs out there, and they're still there, are not appeasable, as you know. They're not going away, as you know. You may not be interested in them, but they are interested in you, and their target is our country and its future. Now for today's show. Our guest today is a little diversion from politics and public policy. We're going to talk about sports, and we're going to talk about sports with one of the preeminent experts in sports collectibles in the country, Jeff Rosenberg, who I've known for decades. And Jeff, it's an honor to have you here.
It's an honor to be on.
So, we're living in this era of COVID. You're coming to us from a secure location, so the vast mobs out there can't find you and mess with you. I'm being facetious, of course. But we're talking about sports. And the interesting thing is, this last weekend, over the last week or so, we had Major League Baseball kind of come back. The teams are playing with no audience. The NBA is playing in a bubble in Orlando with digital crowds and fake noise. And I was going to get and interesting that I read today that the ratings for this last weekend were not overly impressive. Not as impressive as you and I would think there would be, because people are at home, they can't go anywhere, they're starved for entertainment. So your take is what they've done, the major leagues, an answer to our boredom?
Well, I think they're doing the best they can under the circumstances, factoring the health crisis in. I can tell you in my home, the ratings are through the roof. My son and I, we're big basketball fans, especially our Houston Rockets. So we've been watching. In fact, as I speak, I sit here in my home office. My son and my nephew are in the other room watching the NBA TV and watching basketball. But, I think they've done the best job of the leagues in terms of having the ability to pull off the entire season, because what they want to do is play their entire, these 8 or 9 games plus a playoff. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is keeping the players in a bubble. Now, the things they're adding, putting these fans in the stands virtually,
Yeah.
fan noise. I guess it's the best they can do. It's certainly not that exciting experience we're all used to, but under the circumstances, they just want to get the games played. I love basketball, so I'm enjoying watching it. Would I like it better if fans were in the stands? Of course. But I just feel grateful that after all these months, we can at least get some professional sports back on the air.
Now, of course, baseball's different. They're doing it differently. They're playing in their own stadiums, empty. They look like they're playing in these vast caverns. They're not isolated. We've already had a bunch of games canceled because of positive tests for some of the teams. If you ask my opinion is they're not going to get this baseball season in. I don't know what you think, but it's just not the same. It isn't.
It's definitely not the same, and it's going to be hard to get it in because they're not in a bubble. I thought they might go to a different format. I was hoping that they would have like one of the leagues go into Florida for their spring training facilities, maybe the other league go to Arizona, and then maybe the 2 winners meet for the World Series in one of those venues. But they could social distance. They could live in a bubble, so to speak. I think those were some union issues. A lot of major league players didn't like these ideas. So now they're traveling, which I just can't imagine is a good idea. So now instead of having this last 60 games plus playoffs, they may end up with nothing. I mean, very little. So disappointing.
And the optics for Major League Baseball in those giant stadiums with nobody there, I don't care if they put paper cutouts in there, it still looks empty and it looks funny. But you had an idea. You said if you went to the spring training sites, those stadiums are not overly big, and I guess the optics wouldn't be as bad.
Oh, it'd be much better. I mean, those stadiums hold 4,000 or 5,000 people. So, and they look like fields. I mean, the field size is virtually the same as Major League Baseball, but the stadium, the stands is very small. So we're going to try it. I think we're going to go out to Sugar Land this week to see that Skeeters League. and see
Okay.
some just to get out.
Yeah.
My nephew visiting, so I think I want to try that. It's tough. Baseball's tough. I sure hope they make it. I'm rooting for them, but it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about a little bit about sports collectibles. You've been in the business, I don't know, what, 3 decades, 4 decades? One of the
A long time.
pioneers.
So TriStar, our main company, I started in 1987. I graduated University of Texas in May, started TriStar in July, and started law school over at South Texas in August. So I don't know what I was thinking, but I've never practiced law. I've been sports memorabilia. Again, probably 40 years plus, but 33 since I graduated college.
And some of the things you do, your company, when there's not a COVID crisis and people can come together, you sponsor shows in the major venues around the country where sports stars come and meet with their fans, sign autographs, where people can buy sports memorabilia, those kind of things. And those are things people really enjoyed doing before they couldn't.
Yeah, unfortunately, we do. We put on the largest collector conventions in the country. In fact, Gary, this last week is the national show we run. We bring in about 120 to 140 athletes every year, mostly former greats. And that was going to be actually in Atlantic City this year. And next summer, we're planning to be in Chicago. We hope that'll happen, of course. But Atlantic City did not work out. We had sure hoped it would. And then we put on other major shows in markets like Houston, San Francisco. So what we're doing now is we're doing something called private signings. This last week we were very Houston based because we're local in terms of the signings because it's hard to get out. But we just had Roger Clemens, we had Lance Berkman. Who else did we have in the office? Jeff Bagwell, Greg Swindell, Chuck Knobloch. So we had private signings, but I actually did it like on a Facebook Live. So people could watch their items get signed,
Okay.
ask questions of the athletes. So we're trying to do everything we can to provide people with as much normalcy as possible with sports collectibles. But again, we don't know when the next big conventions, the shows will take place.
What is the biggest change that you have noticed or observed in the sports collectible business over your almost 4 decades of being in that business?
Well, it's grown. I mean, we're much bigger. It was a nascent market when I got in, mostly older males involved. Now we're much more family affair. But also, we didn't know whether the items were real or not. We didn't know if an autograph was going to be real. So now there are several companies that actually authenticate the signatures. There are actually companies that authenticate that the cards are real, that they haven't been cut or touched up. So the industry has really grown. We still have a ways to go, but it's much more formal now, and there's a lot more trust in what you're buying. And now the online component has really changed it. We didn't have that. You really only bought, for the most part, from someone you trusted in person. Now you buy online. So once you add the online component, you have to have all these formalities in terms of authenticity, authentication, so you can feel comfortable to buy online.
Well, how does someone who's going to buy, let's say, a baseball card, and it's a card that's worth money, a couple $100 or more, how do they know they can rely on the grading company to be trusted to give them an honest grade?
Well, of course, that's a challenge, but I think it's better. That's a neutral third party, the grading company. I think it's better than trusting the guy who sells it to you. So before the grading came out, Gary, you had to trust the guy you were buying it told you what condition it was in. Now a neutral third party, PSA happens to be the largest out of California, and they put a number grade 1 to 10. And again, there's always going to be arguments within that. There's probably some subjectivity, of course, to that. I think eventually it'll all go electronic. It'll be computerized. No different than I think eventually computers will call balls and strikes in baseball. I think computers will actually put the grade. They'll scan the card and we'll know, is it a 8 or a 7 or a 7.5? but now it's humanized, so it's always subject to more interpretation.
But you consider the development of the third-party graders to be significant in that it gives more reliability to the consumer and transparency as to what's really going on. Is that right?
Absolutely. All of the things I'm talking about are very consumer centric. What myself and several of the key dealers, back in the 80s and 90s, we knew that in order to grow the industry, we would have to have mechanisms where the consumer had the highest level of trust. And so those have come along. We still have a ways to go, but now we have PSA, we have Beckett down in Dallas. Beckett actually authenticates autographs as well as grades the cards, just like PSA does. So you're getting a real third party looking at your item and giving you an honest assessment. So for the autographs, they actually give their opinion whether they believe it's real or not, and they also put a grade. TriStar, we're a little different. We're actually doing the signings with the athletes. So when we put our hologram on it, we witnessed it. We actually saw. We're not giving an opinion whether Mickey Mantle signed that ball when he was alive, of course, or let's say Tom Brady today. We actually saw Tom Brady sign it. We put our hologram. You go online, put the number in, and you see when he signed it, where he signed it, the date, and what it was that he signed.
Now, Jeff, we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back with you. I want to when we come out of the break, talk about your great Hollywood story. We'll be back after these messages.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
Have you been injured in an 18-wheeler accident, truck accident, car accident? Was someone texting and ran into the back of you, not paying attention? It doesn't matter what it is. Give me a call, Attorney Willie Powles. We'll fix it today. The number is 281-881-2457. Again, that number is 281-881-2457. We'll fix it today. Call Attorney Willie Powles.
We're back with Jeff Rosenberg, the head of TriStar Sports, and in a little diversion for Tell It Like It Is. It's not necessarily politics and public policy. We're going to talk a little bit about Black Lives Matters and basketball and baseball. But we're talking about sports and sports collecting, something that people can get involved in when you're stuck at home during the COVID crisis. So Jeff, let's talk about, we talked about celebrities. One of the things that I noted from some of your shows over the years, you had autographed dealers that would show up and they had everybody's signature. Robert, all the stars, everybody. And this is, of course, years ago. And one of the things that you found out was the same thing you found out with authentication with sports materials, is there was a lot of forgeries, right?
Much more so because we've been fortunate. I would say most of the athlete have done signings. And for those who don't know, we actually pay the athlete to sit down and sign. Most of the entertainment, Hollywood types never did that. They're actually starting to just over the last few years, but they didn't do it. So how would you get a Hollywood star? Maybe get lucky and catch them at a movie premiere, a red carpet, but very rare to find those signatures.
Okay, but you did have a story to tell. You did a private signing recently with a significant Hollywood star. Would you relate that story, which I found to be fascinating and
interesting? I have so many.
Harrison Ford.
Remind me, Gary, which star?
Harrison Ford.
Oh, yeah. So Harrison Ford, very, very rare autograph. Did not sign much, but we were lucky. Our company was able to do a deal with a guy who deals with these Hollywood celebrities, and Harrison Ford signed a number of items for us, but that is extremely rare. We were actually also able to get 3 others who were in the Star Wars movies, the key actors, and that we put some great pieces together, but that's very rare.
So with Ford, you had to go meet him. Where did you end up meeting him to do the signing?
So what happened was, and I wasn't there, it was a gentleman we work with. He actually met him at the private airport out there in Los Angeles area. So I guess Ford, and I think he's had 1 or 2 accidents. He
in his airplane, right?
Plane. And so he allowed our people to meet him, I guess, at his private jet terminal, if you will, signed some autographs, and then I guess he flew off just as he would in the movie, probably.
So a private signing like the one with Harrison Ford, how long would have lasted?
Oh, that was a really quick one. I think about 30 to 45 minutes he gave us, and that was it. Usually we'll get more, maybe an hour or 2, but he's so difficult. I mean, we would take anything, and we got a few minutes.
Very interesting. And you said tell us a little bit about this piece that you ended up putting together based on your ability to get all the key autographs for Star Wars.
Yeah. So what happens is people they're really excited when they can get a piece that has like a cast. So I'm not a big Star Wars guy. My son happens to be. So Mark Hamill, of course, was the other big star. The woman, and she's passed away now, that played Princess Leia. And I think the 4th one was the guy who played Darth Vader. We got him as well. So we had all 4 on one piece, and that's a multi-$1,000 item once it's complete.
Yeah, because the cost of acquiring it is so expensive. And then you have behind you a piece that looks like a bunch of all-time Astro greats. Tell us the story behind that.
Well, 2 of my favorites, and I'm probably covering them up a little bit. Maybe I can move so you can see. So my real 2 favorite Astros, when I was a little older, these guys are about my age, actually. But when they came up, it looked like there was something special about these guys, Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell. And there were several things I liked about those 2. One, you could just tell they gave it everything they had every game they played. The other was their loyalty. In the age of free agency and guys going and signing for big money in other cities, I understand the Cubs offered a big contract to Biggio, but both Biggio and Bagwell, they wanted to stay with their hometown, or my hometown Astros, their adopted hometown. So Vernon Wells, a well-known sports artist. In fact, his son, Vernon Wells Jr., was a great baseball player for several teams. He's the one who did this. This is the actual original. And in our company, we were licensed to be able to make prints from this. But this is the original. And since our company did it, and I love these guys, I wanted to keep the original. And it really adds a lot of inspiration to me in my life that 2 guys who, again, could have gone for more money somewhere else stayed for their team, my hometown team, and got us to a World Series, as you know, in 2005. We didn't win it, but they gave everything they had, and that's something I had a lot of respect for.
So you made prints of the original, and then you had the baseball players in the art sign. Is that right?
I did. Yes, they signed the prints, and those were like super hot. We sold them out right away. You can't even find them anymore.
Did
because
the did the
they
players
put them in their collection.
did the players ask to have one for themselves?
They did. I actually I gave each player one because I thought it would be special to them as well.
Well, that's very nice. I like that.
Well, in fact, we did this, I believe, the last year of the Astrodome.
Oh wow, yeah, that's another great one. Okay, let's talk about so sports is back. There was the ratings. The claim has been made that the ratings for basketball and baseball are down, and the suggestion is the viewers, the public is disgusted with the politics coming into sports. That they don't want to see. I mean, one comment was trying to figure out which player that was, and instead of his name, it says equality, Black Lives Matter, whatever the different things that the NBA had approved, except their name. Now, some of the players kept their name on their jersey. I noticed Harden did, and a couple other players, but a lot of them didn't. So you don't even know who they are. And so you have everybody bowing down and during the national anthem, which I don't get the connection between you and me of bowing down the national anthem and being concerned about occasional police violence, which is a concern for all of us. I just don't get it. So why do they want to do politics in sports? People have said, I don't want to do politics in sports. I go to sports because I don't want politics. I've had enough of it. That's all I get, 24/7 everywhere. So what's your take?
Yeah, I agree. And I'll tell you my take specifically. So we noticed our company, we have retail stores in Las Vegas, do a lot of online business, sell everywhere. And we found as soon as you started seeing players with Kaepernick starting to kneel for the anthem, our football sales started going down. And now that's the fear that we have with these other sports, with basketball, baseball falling. Look, it's interesting because ultimately I would think the players would have to do what their owners want. The owners have sort of capitulated, if you will, allowing the players. I personally believe that Black Lives Matter, and I want to see these folks get treated equally. I don't know about some group called Black Lives Matter. I don't know what that's all about, but certainly their lives matter. Now, does that have anything to do with standing for the national anthem in sports? I don't know. I happen to love sports. So what I'm doing is I don't think about any of it. I just watch sports because, as you said, I want to get away from the 24/7 politics. I just want to watch my sports. Exactly. I hope that people around the country will to that point quickly where, and again, we don't need to listen to our athletes in terms of our politics or education. Let's listen to our educators for that, and our parents. I think our parents are great role models for that as well. So I just want to focus on sports. I happen to love sports myself and collect. I'm a big collector. I don't need any politics in my sports, that's for sure.
All right, let's talk about football because we're getting ready into football season, and football is the biggest sport in the country, biggest sport in Texas. And NFL's canceled the preseason games. I'm not sure what they're going to end up doing. College football keeps changing. Some conferences have canceled the whole schedule. Some have canceled non-conference games. Are we going to have any semblance of a normal football season this year?
I don't think so. I was reading yesterday about the 1918 season. That was the last pandemic similar to this. We had the Spanish influenza, and many conferences shut down. Notre Dame got to play 6 games. A couple of key teams got to play their full 7-game schedule in those days. My guess is we'll try, but I think it's going to be really hard to get a season, especially in college. I mean, these are students. Professional's a different game. It is all about the money. Even though college is a lot about the money, students, professionals, it's 100% about the money. So they've got big contracts with the networks. They want to play these games so they can get the money from the networks and the sponsors. I don't know that it can happen. It's not in a bubble. I think basketball, and I've seen hockey, they sort of have the best thing. They're playing in a bubble, and they have the least likely odds of their talent, their players getting this coronavirus. I think it's going to be tougher in football.
Yeah, you think about it in football. I mean, my God, the contact between the players of opposing teams, you could spread COVID to everybody in a quarter of a football game. I mean, literally.
Well, and you could do it in basketball if they have it. See, in basketball, they don't have it right now. Nobody has it, so they're not spreading it. But
Smart.
These football players, they're back at home. They're with their families. Now they're going to jump on a plane, fly to a city, go to a game. They only need to be in contact with one person who has it, and then they can spread it, like you say, to everybody on the field.
Unbelievable.
I think this whole thing is that bubble. The NBA is really the only one I think that has a chance to make it through.
Yeah, they seem to have their act together on that score. Well, Jeff Rosenberg, thank you so much for being with us. Where can people reach TriStar Sports if they're interested during their time at home during COVID to look at a new area where they could have as a hobby, an investment, etc.?
Well, the great thing is we're online, tristarproductions.com, TRISTARPRODUCTIONS.com. And you can reach out to us if you're a collector, you want to buy something, or if you have a bunch of sports memorabilia and you're looking for an appraisal, you want to sell it or just get it appraised for insurance, send us a message at TriStar Productions. It will be sent directly to me, and I can help you with that appraisal.
Yeah, and in fact, you have we could do another show of the stories of the finds that people find in their closet that's been put away forever by dad, grandfather. It turns out it's kind of like something really valuable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I brought some treasures. If you'd like me to show them, I will, of things that are found, like that baseball signed by Lou Gehrig and bats, with Roger Maris's game-used bat I have here, and I can show that if that's okay, and people can see those things.
So we got to wrap because I got to move on to the next interview.
Oh, sure.
But we'll save it for the next time we have you back to talk about the state of sports. Thank you so much, Jeff Rosenberg. And we'll be back after these messages with our next guest, Matt Makoviak.
When it comes to protecting yourself and your partners, all the information out there can be overwhelming. Visit our website. We are a free and confidential service striving to help you stay informed and stay notified. We are committed to a healthy Houston.
Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. Drive the new 2020 Cadillac XT4, only $399 a month, or the new 2020 XT5, only $429 a month, both for 39 months lease with just $1 down. Or purchase the XT4 or XT5 and enjoy 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com. Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, Ron Carter Cadillac, delivers test drives to your home or office. For a limited time, get $16,000 off all in-stock Cadillac 2019 XT5 crossovers and $19,000 off all in-stock 2019 CT6 sedans. Or experience the first ever 2020 Cadillac XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, only $519 with $1 down for 39 months lease. Or purchase and receive 0.9% APR for 72 months with no payments until November. RonCarterCadillac.com.
We're back on Tell It Like It Is, and our guest is Matt Makoviak. Matt Makoviak publishes Must Read Texas, which is a daily newsletter that's essential reading if you want to know what's going on in Texas. He also does podcast video interviews. He's a political consultant, well-respected, not just in Texas, but in Washington. And he's also chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. He does that in his spare time. Matt Makoviak, welcome to Tell It Like It Is.
Hey, Gary. Great to be with you. How you doing?
I'm great. Good to see you. So there's so much going on politically that I hope we could get in the highlights. But last night in Austin, there was an incident where I'll let you describe it because you live in Austin. You have a front row seat. What was going on?
Well, this has been building over time. Sort of some radical elements on the left in Austin have been trying to, create protests here. Not all that different from what you're seeing in places like Portland and Seattle and other cities. And so there was a highly publicized effort to protest on the UT campus on Saturday night and then march all the way to one council member's house and protest there. This is a left-wing council member, but she, I think, didn't want to cut an entire $100 million from the police budget. She wanted to cut a little bit less than that, and that was insufficiently woke. So yeah, the protest was I think had the risk of becoming violent. They were asking for bricks and other weapons effectively to be donated, but the Austin Police Department and the Texas Department of Public Safety did an extraordinary job of really controlling the crowds, keeping things safe, keeping property from being destroyed. And I think by the end of the night, the protests really kind of petered out, and they were able to say what they wanted and do what they wanted in a peaceful way. But things didn't get violent, and that's exactly the way it should be.
Yeah, which, by the way, the vast majority of Americans are fine with people peacefully protesting, trying to get their message out. But why is it that we could figure out in Texas how to deal with this, and in Portland we're on what, day 65 of nightly violence? What is their problem there, Matt?
Yeah, it's striking, because if you look at it, the political leadership in Austin and the political leadership in Seattle and Portland are really not that different. These are really progressive cities with really progressive mayors and city councils. I don't know if the presence of the Department of Public Safety, the state DPS troopers, gave the police department greater resources, greater strategic help, greater logistical help. I do know we have an outstanding police chief in Austin in Brian Manley, who has been undermined almost every day he's been police chief by our left-wing council. But he obviously took this threat seriously. As you may know, I forget if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had a tragic incident where a Black Lives Matter protester who had a semi-automatic weapon on him, approached a car and I guess pointed it at the car, and the person in the car shot him and killed him. This was Garrett, I think Garrett Ross is his name. And that's obviously led to some increased tensions in Austin over the last couple of weeks. But we'll see what the prosecutors do in that case. But yes, I think Texas did show that you can control these large crowds, that you can make sure they're organized, but make sure they're safe and make sure they don't descend into the kind of violence and rioting and looting that we've seen in other cities. Okay,
let's talk about, I want to mention, you do lead the Republican Party in Travis County, which is a challenge. I understand. Of course, it's a challenge in every major city in Texas now. I wanted to ask you, what is your take on why the state party voted in a new leader?
Yeah, that was, I think, it was a mix of factors, but I think that the greatest factor was real dissatisfaction with the virtual convention, which was, glitchy and had problems. A lot of people couldn't get their credentials. Look, it's one thing to do a Zoom call for 10 or 15 people. It's another to say you want to have 10,000 people participate. Then when you add to that the fact that they all have to have credentials, they all have to be able to vote, and they all have to be able to go in 36 meeting rooms at one time and then 31 meeting rooms at another time and be able to vote there as well. This is an immensely complicated task, and the State Republican Executive Committee gave the state party basically 3 days to prepare. They said they could not prepare a backup plan for a virtual convention until all legal remedies were exhausted. They weren't exhausted until Monday, and the convention was, I think, supposed to start Thursday. It ended up losing all of Thursday. It started Friday, but then there were problems. Look, let's give Alan West some credit. He was challenging the incumbent, who I think had done a very good job.
Right.
But Alan West is a major figure. He's been on Fox News for years. He's led nonprofits. He's raised enormous amounts of money. He's spoken at Republican gatherings all over the state, all over the country, and he did have a big following. And I think that was part of it as well.
Yeah, he was a little more of a celebrity than James Dickey. Dickey being more of a workhorse.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And look, I don't believe we need a celebrity as state chair. I think we need a workhorse. I think we need someone who understands what the state chair job is, how to work with county parties, how to raise money, how to work with elected officials, how to push a conservative agenda at the legislature, but how to not burn relationships with state elected officials. It's a tenuous, balance.
Easy.
And James can take, a real measure of satisfaction with what he's turning over to Alan. He's turning over an organization that's $5 million cash on hand. I think the state party had never had more than $2 million cash on hand. They registered over 125,000 new voters since January of 2019 in Texas. That's a record. Thousands of volunteers, more Republican candidates up and down ballot across the state than ever before. I don't think it's a good system that we have where we elect a new chairman 4 months before a consequential election.
Stupid.
I think that's insane.
Stupid.
Absolutely insane. But I think Alan has some strengths that James didn't have. I think he has some weaknesses too. I hope it looks like so far he's keeping the team in place to get through the election. I think that's smart. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing as a party chairman, I call it a thankless job, that people don't appreciate the work. They don't appreciate what you do. And there's appreciation only basically after you're gone. And after you've left and all those things you did, a lot of it below radar that people never heard about, suddenly they tell you, oh, we really miss you. You really did a lot of stuff. I didn't even realize you did so much stuff. I mean, that was my experience. I'm sure it's going to be James's experience. It'll be your experience when you move on from this thankless position of being a party chairman. Let's talk about the state of politics in Texas. The Democrats are talking a big game. We're gonna take control of the House in Austin. We're gonna defeat John Cornyn for re-election. Joe Biden, if he comes out of his closet long enough, will win Texas over Donald Trump. What is your take on where we're at today?
Yeah, look, I am not as sort of chicken little as a lot of people are about Texas. That doesn't mean I don't take the threat seriously, and it doesn't mean that Texas won't be more competitive this cycle than it's been in a presidential cycle in 25 years, because I think it will. I think it's going to be competitive. But look, this is where the margin matters, right? You have to start by remembering that Trump won Texas by 9% in 2016. That is not close. Okay, Trump won Iowa by 10 points. In 2016, and no one is saying Iowa's a state that's going to flip or a battleground state. Now people are pointing to 2018, where Beto O'Rourke lost to Ted Cruz at the statewide level at the top of the ticket by 2.6%, and he did that by winning over a number of suburban counties: Montgomery and Fort Bend in Houston, Tarrant County and Collin up in the DFW area. He flipped the counties directly north and south of Austin, Williamson County, and Hayes County. Those suburban gains he made on behalf of the Democratic ticket are why they won 12 state House seats, why they won 2 state Senate seats, why they won 2 congressional seats, why every Republican judicial candidate in Harris County lost, as you know better than most.
Yes.
But I just fundamentally reject that Democrats start in the 2020 election cycle where they stopped in 2018. Midterms and presidential cycles are different. They are qualitatively different. And the reason for that is that midterms are sort of lower stakes, and it has a lot to do with which party's in power, which party's more energized. Presidential cycles are actually highly predictive. Voters who vote every 4 years, time and time again. Doesn't matter who's running. There's a small number of people in the middle who float between the two parties, who decide who wins and who loses. But so I just start, Gary, by saying I think 2020 is going to look more like 2016 in Texas than 2018. And so does that mean Trump's going to win by 9% again? No. And he's not going to win by more than 9%. He's going to win by less than that. I've been saying 6 to 8%, maybe 5 to 7, depending on where his numbers are in the fall. But for Biden to flip Texas would require 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars invested here. And I just don't see any evidence that they're going to do that they're going to feel the need to do that. They have so many other pathways to 270 electoral votes through the Midwest, through the Southwest, states like Arizona, through the South, states like Georgia. That's where they're going to put their money and their resources, I believe. That doesn't mean the demographic hurricane that's coming ashore in Texas in the medium term isn't coming. It does. It absolutely is. And Texas Republicans have to do a better job winning Hispanic votes. We have to win back the suburbs. There's a lot that we have to do, but I fundamentally believe 2020 will be more like 2016 in Texas than 2018. And so because of that, I do believe Republicans will hold the Texas House. I think Cornyn will win by a larger margin than Trump does. And I think Trump will win by a comfortable margin in 2020.
If O'Rourke was ran 2 years ago on the platform he ran running for president, would that race have even been close against Cruz?
Yeah, it's a great point. And, one of the things that it's hard to think back to this 2 years ago, Gary, because so much has happened. But you got to remember, Beto O'Rourke was a celebrity in 2018 and national celebrity. he's not viewed that way anymore. He's sort of a second or third tier national figure in the Democratic Party. Still has large lists. Still is able to get on MSNBC. Still is able to raise money and be active. But he's not a real national figure in that sense. When he was running for U.S. Senate, I mean, he's the only U.S. Senate candidate who's ever raised $80 million, incumbent or challenger. The only one who's, I'm sure, who's ever been on Ellen DeGeneres' show. He's the only one who's ever been on the cover of Vanity Fair. These kinds of things are really unusual. And when you combine Beto's $80 million with turning out 1 million new voters, which he did in 2018, with straight ticket voting, which 75 to 80% of those new voters voted straight ticket Democrat, that is why Beto O'Rourke cut a 9% margin to a 2.6% margin. Those factors won't be in place in 2020. That's another reason why I think it won't look like 2018 in Texas, is that they're not going to have that financial advantage. They're not going to have a celebrity candidate like Beto who's bringing out new voters. And they're not going to have straight ticket voting, which is going to be over, which I think is going to be a net loser for the Democrats. I think it's probably going to be good for Republicans in urban areas, good for Democrats in rural areas, and a mix in the suburbs. But I think it's a net negative for Democrats. The data has shown the Democrats vote more consistently on a straight ticket than Republicans do.
Do you think there's going to be debates for the presidency?
I do, and Biden has consistently said he will, and his team has consistently said he will. Now, whether there will be 3 debates, I doubt. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe there's just one. I do think there's a chance Biden will say, will either issue an ultimatum. You've seen a couple Democratic advisors say, tell Trump if he doesn't release his tax returns, you won't debate. But I think the other thing that might happen is you might see Biden say, because of COVID, I can't debate. In which case, the Presidential Commission on Debate should say, okay, we're going to do them in a TV studio. It's the moderator, a camera person, and the 2 candidates, and that's it. Right. All socially distanced.
So they can do a Lincoln Douglas debate style, where the 2 candidates go at it.
A number of options. I mean, you have seen, I think 2 of the 3 debates have changed locations, or maybe one debate's changed twice. I think one of them moved from Notre Dame to Cleveland, and I think another one moved as well. I forget where it went to. So there have been some changes. But look, Biden needs the debates too. People are focusing on how much Trump needs them, and he does. He needs to win decisively. But Biden needs to answer the question as to whether he really is up to this, whether he is as sharp as he needs to be. He cannot get elected president from the basement of his Wilmington, Delaware house. He's been doing that in the summer when the stakes have been low. But as we get close to him naming his vice presidential running mate, as we get close to the Democratic convention, which I guess is going to be virtual, he's going to get smoked out. He's going to have to start campaigning on a daily basis, and that's going to change things.
Well, yeah, I mean, you saw he does these so-called press availability, but the people who are asking the questions have already submitted the question. He already knows who he's calling on. He has a teleprompter, so he already has the answer in front of him to read. I mean, I don't think there's anything extemporaneous coming from off his brain, Joe Biden. I mean, and that wasn't always true. You go back 4, 8, 12 years ago, Joe was with it and could handle that. I mean, he still made some mistakes, like a lot of people do. I don't fault him there. But I worry that, he will be the oldest president to take office in the history of the country. Older than Ronald Reagan's second term, and and I know that Ronald Reagan's second term was slowing down. He absolutely was, because I met him a couple of times, and I could tell from that way he was then as the way he was the years before. So that's a real concern.
Yeah, and you can argue the presidency is more intense now than it was then too, right? The never-ending news cycle, the constant pressures, the national security responsibilities, the political pressure up on Capitol Hill, this global sort of marketplace, global economy we're in. It's all far more complicated today than it's ever been. And so, look, Biden has to answer that. He's got to demonstrate that he's up to this. He was up to it when he was vice president. But he has not really answered the question as to whether he's up to it yet, and the debates are going to show that. Look, he can't hide. He won't have a teleprompter. The questions won't be provided in advance, and you can that Trump is going to get in his face. He did that with Hillary. He was willing to attack her, and that was against a woman, against a female candidate, which is dicey sometimes.
Right.
But look, part of how Trump is going to get reelected, if he gets reelected at all, is he has got to raise Biden's negatives. To me, he's got to raise Biden's negatives. Biden has soft name ID. I don't think it's hard name ID. People generally know who he is. They know he's vice president to Obama. They know he's been around a long time. But I don't think you could really, if you ask most people to tell you something specific about Joe Biden, I'm not sure they could. And so he still is definable. But the second thing for Trump is he's got to get his job approval to the mid-40s. A month ago he was in the mid to high 30s. That was a disaster. He's now in the low 40s. His job approval and his reelect number have been trending almost exactly the same. And so this is entirely about his presidency. People are going to be rendering a judgment. He's got to make it a choice between him and Biden, but he can't do that if he's in the low 40s in job approval. He's got to get to the mid 40s.
If you look at his numbers on the economy, people trust him a lot more on the economy than they do Biden. But what's interesting is it doesn't seem to matter given what the COVID crisis has done to us. And I don't know. I don't have any answers to what the problem is, except I thought it was a big mistake shutting the country down and putting people out of work to stop the disease when I don't think it really made much difference at all. My take.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at California, which from a public health standpoint did everything right. And they're dealing with more cases, high positivity rates, hospital systems being overrun, just like states like Texas, Arizona, and Georgia, and Florida, that many folks on the left would argue open too quickly. So, look, I think that this whole race changed. I remember in January when Trump gave his State of the Union, he looked unbeatable. I remember even saying that on the McLaughlin Group at that time. It's really things can change. He thought he was going to have an unbelievably strong case on the economy, and he's not.
Well, he did.
He did then. He's just not going to have that, in November. Now, what I do think is possible is you could have the third quarter GDP number as bad as the Q2 GDP number was, with a 10% decline, largest in history. You could have 10, 15, 20% positive growth in the third quarter. So that gives him an opportunity to make it about the economy again, to say, look, I rebuilt the economy once, I can do it again. I'll do it better than Biden will. And if economic sentiment, consumer sentiment is improved by the time early October comes around, if you combine that with the debates and hopefully some good news on at least therapeutics and perhaps even vaccines, you can imagine a scenario where this starts to change from it being a 5 or 8 point race in Biden's favor to basically a toss-up race in the battleground states. That's the best case scenario for Trump right now, unless Biden self-destructs. And look, you have to keep that in mind. He's self-destructed in the past. 1988, even his 2008 presidential campaign was pretty disastrous. He's had a lot of problems, and he's not who he once was. He's not anywhere near as sharp as he once was.
He could have that problem. Okay, let's ask this question. How has the COVID crisis impacted the political futures of the major leaders in Texas?
Yeah, look, there's no question that Governor Greg Abbott is kind of dealing with a really difficult situation right now. He's, at least in the polling, he's in a rough patch. And he's as sensitive to that as anyone, and he recognizes that some of the decisions he's made have not been popular. He's in a place right now where he can't make anyone happy. And in fact, almost everything he does makes people unhappy on both sides, right? He's getting a lot of pressure from the right for allowing the mask requirements or for shutting down bars, placing other restrictions. He's getting pressure on the left for, not shutting down schools from reopening or for not shutting down the economy again.
Right.
So, he is the only person in Texas who has the dual responsibility of trying to protect public health while also protecting the state economy. There's just no one else who sits in that chair who has the same responsibility, the same data, the same burden. And look, I think over time we can look back and he would probably admit reopening the bars when they did, how they did, was a mistake. I think that the recent outbreaks we've had in our major cities has been more than just the bars. I think it's been partially the social justice protests, which happen with large crowds. It's been partially young people congregating, not just in bars, but other places. It's been partially the testing that we're doing in our prisons and in our nursing homes. It's been the reopening. It's been a mix of factors. It's a complicated situation. So obviously, Abbott's numbers in Texas have taken a hit. I think I saw he was in the high 30s on his approval on COVID response. I think his overall job approval was basically 50-50. And he's generally been much higher than that. And obviously, this has taken a bite out of the Texas economy, which has been one of his strong selling
big bite, and they're going to have a shortage of funds for the next biennium. Let me ask you one final quick question. There are some folks in the state have said that Texas should take the plunge and legalize marijuana like they did in Colorado and other states. In fact, I've seen the statistics. Actually, they estimate Texas would gain $4 billion in tax revenue over the next biennium if they did that in the next session. Any chance that's happening? to help fill the money gap?
Not while Dan Patrick is Lieutenant Governor and President of the Texas Senate. I mean, he has said specifically that will never happen. And I think you have a pretty conservative Texas Senate. You might have there's one seat that's a swing seat,
Right.
but they've said they'll go down to a lower threshold to be able to move legislation. So no, I don't see that. Medicinal marijuana or prescribed marijuana or hemp,
Maybe.
some of these things, have some potential for medical uses, people with glaucoma and situations like that. I'm very sensitive to people in those desperate situations. But no, I don't think elected officials in Texas have seen the model or the experiment in Colorado and said we want to try that. There will be other opportunities to create revenue. I always wonder why in Texas hasn't taken hold, particularly if you just did it inside, let's say, 25 miles of the state border, since that's what you have in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Well, that's a good point. That would bring in revenue
Oklahoma.
too. That'd bring in
Yeah,
revenue.
that might be one way to do it. There have been social conservatives who've argued against that, and I understand there'd be some opposition. But yeah, they're going to be in a hole. They're going to look to try to do that through cutting spending more than anything else, I imagine.
It's always good to increase revenue too. Well, Matt, time is up. Thank you so much for being with us this week. And folks, you can read Must Read Texas at mustreadtexas@gmail.com is where you can find Matt's daily publication. And we'll have Matt back periodically to discuss the state of politics, not just in Texas, but in the United States. I want to thank you for watching. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. You can email the show at garypolland@americanstar.com. You can also get my biweekly newsletter, the Texas Conservative Review, by signing up for free at texasconservativereview.com. Remember, in the immortal words of President Ronald Reagan, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we will sentence them to take the final step into 1,000 years of a new dark age. That comment by Ronald Reagan is more true today than it ever has been. See you next week.